So on Sunday we had a brand new Constructors Champion, and for the first time in 14 years that Constructors Champion was not Mercedes or Red Bull. So this has been a long time coming, and it's quite mad to think that it's been that long. So not only was it the first time in 14 years that we had somebody not called Mercedes or Red Bull winning the championship, it's also the first time in 26 years that it was McLaren that won it. Yep, it's the first time that McLaren has won the Constructors Championship since the end of the 1998 season. To put that into perspective, I was 8 years old. 8. Driving for the team that year was Mika Hakkinen with David Coulthard in the other car. Both cars powered by Mercedes, as it so happens, like they were on Sunday. But for extra statistical analysis and trivia, it means that McLaren is now on 9 Constructors titles, and Mercedes as an engine manufacturer is now on 10 Constructors titles. McLaren, as the result of winning the Constructors this year, draws level with Williams, with the two of them behind only Ferrari, and they are 1 Constructors title ahead of Mercedes. Lotus remains third even after all this time, with Red Bull on 6 titles, Cooper, Brabham and Renault on 2, and then Vanwell, BRM, Matra, Tyrrell, Benetton and Brawn on just the 1 title. Which sounds mad, doesn't it? That since the Constructors' Championship became a thing in 1958, 15 teams have won a championship. But weirdly, there are some parallels between 2024 and 1998, because on both of the occasions that McLaren won the Constructors' Championship, so this time and the previous time, they had to beat another team at the final race. Ferrari. In 1998, the championship battle was between Hakkinen and Schumacher, and the final race of the season was at Suzuka in those days. I remember watching the full race replay that ITV would show around lunchtime if the race was in Australia and Japan, and with no internet, well, I mean, there was internet, but it wasn't like it is now. You relied on teletext and CFAX to tell you the results, and it was much easier to avoid spoilers. So watching it at that time, not knowing who had won already, was epic. And where it also had parallels is that the Ferrari driver had to do effectively a last to first challenge. Leclerc was hampered twice before the race, because he had to take a 10-place grid drop for changing engine components, and he also had a rubbish qualifying session, so he had to start in 19th. Not good if you're trying to win Ferrari's first Constructors title since 2008. So it was Ferrari hunting for its first title in 16 years and McLaren for 26. It's all falling together nicely, isn't it? Everything seems to be lining up. But like I said, last to first challenges were happening now and then, because in the 1998 season finale, Schumacher, who was in a prime place to take the victory then as he bagged pole, had stalled his car on the grid. There was no anti-stall in those days, and stalling the car was quite common because of that, and there was also the general unreliability of the cars in those days, and cars would pull to the side of the road for a multitude of things that just doesn't really happen today. What happened was, Jarno Trulli had stalled his car on the grid and the start was aborted. The cars had to do another formation lap, but while things were being shuffled around to get the cars back in place for that next formation lap, McLaren were dumping dry ice into Hakkinen's car to cool it down, while Ferrari didn't touch Schumacher's car at all. It's thought that the heat build-up in Schumacher's car caused his clutch to slip or something like that, and he stalled the car. Unlike Trulli, he was sent to the back of the grid despite the protests coming from Jean Todt because of the championship being on the line and everything else like that, but rules were rules. He had to go to the back of the grid. That's how the procedure was. And like Schumacher did in 1998, Leclerc went on an absolute charge. What was incredibly impressive is that Leclerc went from 19th to inside the top 10 before he made the start of Sector 3, which, considering what was at stake for the team, is incredible progression. He jumped Albon off the line, passed the stationary credit card mobile of Sonoda, and then passed Douan's Alpine before they'd even got to the apex of Turn 1. Granted, he did pick up 2 freebies because of Verstappen and Piastri spinning round, and he also passed Zhou as he went off the track to avoid Verstappen and Piastri. But then Hamilton was dispatched with in Turn 3. By getting around Stroll on the outside of Turn 5, Leclerc had gone from 19th to 11th in the space of, well, 5 corners. Schumacher, when he did his last to first, had got to 12th. Again, it's scary how things line up. Leclerc then showed incredible vision to then swoop around Perez, Bottas, Magnussen and Lawson as they all went for the inside line into Turn 6. Bottas and Perez collided and Leclerc had got himself up to 8th before he'd even made Sector 3. 11 positions gained, 3 of them fortunate admittedly, but as I've said before with other occasions, most notably Verstappen in Brazil, Leclerc was presented with an opportunity through taking whatever was going on and just took those opportunities. And everybody's been raving about Verstappen at Brazil and his opening lap, but Leclerc deserves a lot of plaudits that he really should be getting for this opening lap. I don't think he's been getting the credit that he's due considering the circumstances. So, while we're here, let's take a look at two of those supposed gifts. Max threw it up the inside of Piastri and the two made contact. Max spun and styled it out while Ascher took a little longer to get going, and Ascher said something along the lines of, "Yep, move of a champion that one," in the heat of the moment. And of course, if you've been spun around lap 1 while you're trying to grab a 1-2 and solidify the Constructors' Championship, you're going to say stuff in the heat of the moment. Something microphone on a footballer. It's amazing how he was so calm about it, considering I'd have been raging. I was busy doing other things, so admittedly I didn't see it live. Unlike in 1998, we have access to 997 different camera angles and it's all up on Twitter within 10 seconds of it happening, so once I heard, I had a quick look at it and offered an opinion. And that opinion was, looks like Max took too much curb, it unsettled the car and he clanged Ascher. Not sure what that was going to achieve. And that was just a quick in the moment look at what I saw rather than anything in depth looking at every frame just because I can. Either way, it dumped Ascher right back down to the back of the field and could have had championship implications, so I'm guessing the socials were alive with complaints at the time. But Max apologised for it and even admitted that he was at fault, so cool, we can move on. Well, not necessarily, because there is other stuff to address regarding people's reactions to that incident. It's not like Max was trying to intentionally fire Ascher off the road, and people need to stop pretending that every piece of contact is a deliberate attempt at wiping someone off the road. Even the pros make mistakes. It was simply an overly optimistic attempt at grabbing a position at the start. Both cars continued, and both cars finished within the top 10. Did Max deserve a penalty for it? Well, it is an interesting one because of how messed up Formula 1 has been recently, with the changing of race directors, changing of stewards panels, and these absolutely all over the place guidelines for overtaking that some are taking discretion with and some are treating as a bible. The document that made the penalty official is, along with all the others, on the FIA's website, and it reads that Car 1 attempted to overtake Car 81 on the inside of Turn 1 but never got far enough alongside. Both cars collided shortly after the apex. The stewards determined that the driver of Car 1 was wholly at fault and caused the collision, and this was signed off by the stewarding panel of Felix Holter, Loic Bakalan, Mohamed Al-Hashimi and Derek Warwick, someone who's been accused of being very lenient to Max in the past. 2 penalty points were also added to Max's licence, which takes him up to 8 in total. Similarly, Bottas got 10 seconds and 2 penalty points for tipping Perez round at turn 6, but didn't get anything for absolutely drilling Magnussen on lap 31. So there was consistency with the 2 penalties dished out for lap 1 incidents. Max got a 10-second penalty and 2 points, Valtteri got a 10-second penalty and 2 points. But the thing is, with these lap 1 incidents, they do get penalised. It is rare, but it's not without precedent. Max said after the race that he tried to grab the inside, and when he committed, that's when the gap started to close. He couldn't get out of it and he just simply hit Ascher. And people are saying, why wasn't Ascher looking in his mirrors or doing anything like that? But Oscar's not got eyes in the back of his helmet or something like the reversing camera that you find on a road car. And Max also made the point that Ascher would have been watching Lando and not expecting somebody to fire it up the inside like that. We've seen before that the Red Bull doesn't like curbs, so getting that far on the inside curb was going to make things look a bit luck of the draw, if you want to call it that. The thing is, on the external shot, it looks like the Red Bull does lose a little bit of control or grounds out on the curb, and on the onboard it's a little bit harder to see. I just see it as an optimistic move that didn't get pulled off. If Max did pull it off, he would have looked like a racing god, and it would have looked brilliant on the TV cameras, and everybody would be going, oh yeah, proper racing and stuff like that. But as it was, Max didn't pull it off, Ascher got spun round, Max got spun round, Max got a penalty. It is what it is. But at the same time, it hasn't stopped people pulling out that old tired if you no longer go for a gap line. And one of the comments online actually says right here, I guess you don't want drivers to try and go for a gap. There was a famous quote about that. How does it go again? Firstly, that quote translates to, yeah, I slammed him off the road. What are you going to do about it? And secondly, there needs to be a gap there to start with. It has to be the most taken the wrong way quote in racing history, even sporting history. It's not some super smart philosophical line equal to being the racing version of Descartes. It's a deflection of something that the guy who said it admitted to 12 months later. I look at it in the same way that rubbing is racing has been used to justify some absolutely dogshit driving standards. Mario Andretti said back in 1990 or 1991 that there are gaps, and there are gaps, and the trick is to find one that your car will fit into. Now, I'm not directing this at Max, I'm directing it at the fans who constantly pull out the no longer go for a gap that exists line for, well, anything, but I digress. But it's not like Oscar did himself any favours, because he later hit Colapinto under braking for turn 6 and was lucky to not rip his front wing off. Like with Bottas and Verstappen, he got the same penalty of 10 seconds and was also hit with 2 points on his licence. Imagine if he'd ripped the front wing off or caused race-ending damage to his car. It might have given Ferrari fans even more hope, but Oscar was incredibly lucky with it. At the same time, he was probably driving angry to catch back up given what had happened to him at turn 1. By lap 36, once the pit stops had cycled round, Leclerc was up to 3rd behind Sainz and Norris. 19th to 3rd with just over half the race completed. That's insane going. McLaren was still on course to win the championship at this point, even with Piastri down in 15th, as McLaren would be getting 25 points, Ferrari 33, Red Bull 2 for Verstappen being 9th as it stood, and Mercedes getting 18 with Russell 4th and Hamilton 7th. Ferrari had to score 22 points more than McLaren at this race, and as it was, they were scoring just 8 more. If Sainz got into the lead, Ferrari and McLaren would be tied on points by my maths, and those maths are usually bad. If Sainz had won the race and Leclerc was 3rd, taking the championship to a tiebreaker because the two teams in Ferrari and McLaren would have been equal on points, Ferrari would have won the championship. Going into the race at Abu Dhabi, they both had 5 wins apiece. Ferrari would have taken their 6th win with Sainz winning, and that would have won them Constructors' Championship. So there was still everything to play for, and it could all turn on its head, especially if McLaren fumbled a safety car or virtual safety car. Meanwhile, while everybody was watching Leclerc come through the field in the battle for the Constructors' Championship, which, is natural, given that either one of those teams would win their first championship in a very long time as a result of winning the championship, but Hamilton was also making his way through the field from starting near the back. He probably would have been through to the second qualifying session at least, but he got a bollard caught under his car after Magnussen hit it and it slowed him down. But despite being utterly dejected after qualifying, he got his head down and moved up the field, with Bono telling him that 3rd was possible at one point, but that would have required some divine intervention. So Mercedes started Hamilton on the hards and put him onto the mediums quite late. After his stop on lap 35, he set off in pursuit of everybody who was on the opposite tyre to him, managing to get out in front of Alonso and leaving him with Hulk, Gasly and Russell in front. How far could Lewis get up in his final race with Mercedes? Well, we certainly found out over the course of the final 18 laps or so. On lap 43, he caught and overtook Gasly, and Gasly was once again having a very good yet very quiet race out there. And it also looked like Alpine had found something with pace in the last few races of the season, because they were quite the meme early on, and I even did videos on the fact that they were a meme. 15 laps then to catch Russell, who was 14.5 seconds ahead. One last hammer time. By the start of the final lap and a bit, Lewis had caught right up to the back of Russell. George was using the final sector to harvest his battery to try and defend on the straights, since Lewis had fresher and faster tyres. And using the battery to defend from DRS has been a tactic since, well, the old days of Kers on the V8s. What also helped George is that Lewis was not able to use DRS on the first of the long straights between the hairpin and the chicane because of Lawson's car being off to one side. So George would have had some breathing room, but Lewis closed up so much on the brakes into the chicane, he was right on the back of George's car to the point where he could read the part number on the rear wing. Lewis dummied Russell into that left-hander at the end of the second straight to take 4th position away for him and finish his final race with Mercedes in, well, 4th. But in doing so, he'd actually managed to outscore George over the 3 years that they'd been together. Still, only Button has outscored Lewis in the time as teammates. So the final results of the final race of the season show that Lando won the race ahead of the two Ferraris of Sainz and Leclerc, with Leclerc taking a well-deserved Driver of the Day award considering the race he had to pull off to try and salvage the title. Hamilton ended his time at Mercedes in 4th, after racking up 78 pole positions, 153 podiums, 84 wins and 6 titles with that team. Not bad for a risky move. George was 5th, Verstappen recovered to 6th, Gasly 7th, Hulk 8th in his last race with Haas, and Fernando and Oscar finished the points-paying positions. In the Constructors, McLaren took the title at the final race, finishing with 666 points, which may or may not be an omen. Ferrari just missed out with 652, Red Bull were third on 589, Mercedes fourth in their own little bubble on 468, then it was Aston fifth, Alpine sixth after being in ninth for so long, followed by Haas, the credit cards, Williams and Sauber. So after all of that, what next? Can Ferrari get that extra leap forwards into 2025? Can Leclerc use what he did on Sunday to take it into next season and properly challenge McLaren? Will Lewis show that the old dog still has a few tricks? Can Red Bull fix their car? How will the rookies do? Will Sainz show up Albon at Williams? Will Checo still be at Red Bull? Will Tsunoda get promoted over Lawson if Checo does go? What about Hadjar? Can Nui work some limited magic with whatever Aston designs and get them nudged in the right direction? Who even knows at this point? But I'm sure the other F1 YouTubers will find something to talk about between now and March. Is 2025 a season to be excited about? Let me know down in the comments and get a discussion going. So after a start of the season that looked like it was just going to be 2023 version 2, it ended up being quite entertaining at the end, didn't it? So then, a look at the final race of the 2024 Formula 1 season and some extra opinion stuff to go with it. If you enjoyed this video, then by all means give it a like so the algorithm can do its thing. And if you want to see more of my moon-sized head on your screens that is the same colour as my hoodie, as it so happens, then there is the option to subscribe and also get that bell on if you haven't already, so you'll always be notified of whatever I do around here. Massive thanks as ever to the kind folk at Patreon for the continued support, and if you want to help keep things running around here, a link to Patreon is in the description, along with links to Discord, socials and other bits and pieces you might want or need to know. Well, there's super thanks down there if you just want to top up my coffee cup, and memberships for those that want to do Patreon without the Patreon. So until next time, I've been Millward, have a great day wherever you are, and goodbye.